Welcome, dearly beloved chosen ones. Let me start by saying thank you to every single one of you who has supported this mission through super thanks, whether it was a donation, a kind word, or a simple gesture of encouragement. Please know from the depths of my soul, I am truly grateful. Whether you give or not, whether you watch silently or engage fully, your presence here matters. And if you did take the extra step to sow into this message, may it return to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. This is a spiritual journey, and you're not just watching from the sidelines. You're walking it, you're living it, and I honor that. Now let's get into it. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. It's not the one with the most followers, the biggest stage, or the sharpest comebacks. It's the one who already knows and lets you keep talking. Have you ever sat across from someone who lied to your face with Olympic-level confidence? And instead of calling them out, you just leaned back and smiled, letting them dig their own grave one sentence at a time. That's not passivity. That's divine strategy. That's the chessboard of the spiritually awake and chosen one. You've been playing 10 moves ahead from the beginning. Here's something science won't tell you on a spiritual level, but it backs it up. Psychologists say over 90% of human communication is non-verbal. Facial twitches, changes in voice, subtle shifts in posture. People can train their tone, but they can't control their energy. They can rehearse a script, but they can't hide the vibration of deception. And you, chosen one, were born fluent in that language. Their eyes said more than their mouths ever could. Their silence, their hesitation, their forced laughter, those were the real confessions. And while they thought they were fooling you, you were listening with your soul, not your ears. You didn't need confirmation from a screenshot. You didn't need an apology, a witness, or a confrontation, because discernment is your birthright. Intuition is your protection, and divine insight, that's not just something you learned, it's embedded in your very being. So when they lied to your face and watched for a reaction, they had no idea you were recording everything in your spirit with divine clarity. Comment 777 if you've ever let someone keep talking just to see how far they'd go. Because you weren't confused. You were collecting. You weren't naive. You were noting patterns. You weren't playing dumb. You were protecting your peace, your energy, your future. You let them perform while God gave you a front row seat to the unraveling of their character. And now they're scared. Not because you exposed them publicly, but because you could. Because you knew things you were never told. You responded to betrayals they hadn't even admitted yet. And that's what haunts them. That's what keeps them up at night. The realization that while they were testing you, trying to push buttons, trying to measure your loyalty, you were watching them disqualify themselves in real time. No confrontation, no fight, just quiet clarity. This isn't just another "you caught them lying" story. No, this is deeper. This is spiritual surveillance. This is what happens when someone underestimates the depth of someone protected by God. They thought they were manipulating you, but you were memorizing their spirit. They thought they were pulling strings, but you were tracking patterns. They thought they were playing you, but you were the one with the scoreboard the entire time. So buckle up, because in this message, we're diving into the spiritual reason your silence shook them. We're going to uncover why your non-reaction flipped the script, and why walking away without drama was the most powerful, prophetic move you could have ever made. And if you've ever faked a smile, nodded at a lie, or played along just long enough to plan your exit in peace, This one is for you. You weren't passive. You were prophetic. And today, you're about to remember just how powerful it is to know the truth. Speak only when necessary. And move like someone who was never fooled in the first place. Let's begin. God's chosen ones. They're shocked you knew everything. Your accuracy terrifies them. Number 1. You never asked questions because you were studying motives, not stories. Chosen one. Have you ever been in a room full of noise, yet somehow you could hear the silence beneath the sound, while others were hanging on to every word? You were tuned into something deeper, something spiritual. You weren't asking a lot of questions, not because you were disinterested or naive, but because your spirit was already picking up what their mouth was trying to hide. You weren't curious about their version of events. You were watching their energy, their timing, the strange pauses between their lines. Why were they telling you this now? What were they leaving out? And most of all, what did their silence scream louder than their words? You see, most people listen to reply, but you listen to reveal. You've never been the type to interrupt a performance. You let them act. You let them think the mask was holding, even when you already saw the cracks forming. Why? Because your calling isn't to react, it's to observe, discern, and wait for the truth to reveal itself in divine timing. And chosen one, hasn't it always? For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Empo 1 Samuel 16-7. You weren't drawn to the drama of what was being said. You were quietly scanning for the motive behind the monologue, while others judged words. You judged atmosphere. When they laughed too quickly, you felt the nervousness. When their voice cracked mid-sentence, you caught the fear. When their tone changed as soon as a certain name came up, you registered the discomfort. Your gift isn't suspicion, it's divine discernment. Have you ever noticed how people start explaining things you never asked about? That's not coincidence. That's guilt hunting for relief. That's truth trying to escape a trapped spirit. And you, chosen one, have a way of pulling confessions from people without ever demanding them. Think of Princess Diana. The world watched her smile, pose, and play her royal role. But behind that grace was a woman who saw motives in every interaction. She knew when she was being used, watched, manipulated, and though she didn't always speak, she understood. People underestimated her silence, and much like you, her accuracy unsettled the powerful while they thought you were clueless. You were collecting data. You were clocking the contradictions, logging the lies, analyzing the shifts in tone when certain truths got too close. You didn't speak up, not because you didn't know, but because they weren't ready to hear that you knew. That kind of spiritual restraint, it terrifies people, because they can't track what you're not broadcasting. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. Proverbs 17:28. Chosen one. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. And now that time has passed, they're haunted by how calm you were while they were spinning stories. They're replaying conversations, realizing you were never confused. You were just waiting. And what's terrifying them now is the truth. They were never hiding anything from you. They were only exposing themselves to someone who was spiritually awake the entire time. Look at Barack Obama during his presidency. Regardless of where people stood politically, one thing even critics acknowledged was his poise. While others shouted and slandered, he sat still, listening. Many of his opponents were unnerved, not by his arguments, but by his composure. Because when someone isn't reactive, they become unreadable, and unreadable people, they're terrifying to manipulators. You didn't need to ask follow-up questions. You didn't need to pull receipts or dig through rumors. Why? Because when you're spiritually in tune, the truth always rises. You were reading spiritual contracts, not just spoken words. You weren't hunting for facts. You were sensing vibrations. And chosen one, that's a skill no university can teach. It's a gift only heaven can give. The spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all his innermost parts. Are Proverbs 27. Do you remember how you stayed silent when others expected you to explode? How you smiled when you could have exposed them? That wasn't cowardice. That was divine intelligence. The kind of intelligence that makes demons tremble and liars sweat. Because when you don't confront the lie, you let the lie expose itself through time, and it always does. Just like Harriet Tubman, who led hundreds of slaves to freedom. She didn't announce her plans. She didn't go around debating. She simply watched, discerned, and waited for the moment to act. She let the patterns show her who could be trusted and who couldn't. Her discernment wasn't intellectual, it was spiritual. And that's why she succeeded while others perished. So now, here they are terrified. Not because you attacked them, not because you exposed them, but because you knew all along and never said a word. They feel vulnerable now because they remember the things they said, the lies they spun, the games they played right in front of someone who wasn't fooled for a second. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. End quote. Matthew 10:16. And let's talk about wisdom for a moment. Think of Albert Einstein, often known not just for his knowledge, but for the way he questioned what others accepted as truth. His genius wasn't just in equations, it was in knowing how to look beneath the surface. That's you, chosen one. Your gift is not just in observation, it's in revelation. They thought you needed answers, but you already had them. They thought you were clueless, but you were just silent. They thought you'd believe the show, but you read the script before they ever performed it. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil. And Ecclesiastes 12:14. Now they're remembering every moment they stood in front of you and lied, every sentence you let pass, every fake tear, every twisted narrative. And what keeps them up at night isn't the lies, it's the realization that they were never fooling someone ignorant. They were performing in front of someone anointed. And like Maya Angelou once said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You did, but you waited for the right time to move. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You saw, you discerned, you waited, and now the truth is doing the work for you. So here's the question, chosen one, how much more powerful are you when you don't speak, but let truth speak through time? They thought silence meant ignorance, but you knew silence was revelation, and now they know too. Number 2, you let them lie because you needed to know how deep the deception ran. Chosen one, have you ever sat across from someone, looked them in the eyes, and watched them fabricate a reality that didn't exist just to see how far they'd go? You didn't stop them. You didn't interrupt. You didn't even raise an eyebrow. Why? Because you weren't seeking immediate justice. You were studying depth. You were measuring the size of the deception. Not just the surface of the story. You let them lie to your face not because you believed them, but because you were discerning the layers. What were they willing to risk? How far would they twist the truth? And what kind of person could look you in the eye and orchestrate a performance like that without blinking? These weren't just casual lies. These were rehearsed betrayals. And, chosen one, you understood something most people never do. When someone shows you who they are while thinking you're blind, that's when you truly see. Be sure your sin will find you out. 1 Numbers 32-23. You weren't unaware. You weren't naive. You were alert, awake, and watching every move, every fake smile, every shift in tone, every deflection. And instead of reacting emotionally, you collected what they didn't know they were giving you, evidence of character. You let them lie to you because you weren't interested in stopping them. You were interested in studying them. Think of Nelson Mandela. During his 27 years in prison, he didn't waste time shouting back at those who misjudged him. He watched, he observed, and when the time came, his knowledge of character of both friend and foe helped him lead with strategy instead of bitterness. Chosen one, your silence had purpose. Just like Mandela, you were gathering truth while others were revealing their lack of it. You weren't keeping physical receipts. You were keeping spiritual ones. Mental snapshots of contradictions, emotional fingerprints left on every lie. You watched how they told their stories with confidence, not realizing they were stacking a tower of deception that would collapse on their own head. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Luke 8:17. How many times did you want to speak up? How many times did the truth press against your tongue, ready to expose what they thought you hadn't seen, but something in your spirit whispered, wait? Not because you were afraid of confrontation, but because confrontation gives liars a way out. But silence lets them walk further into their own trap, and that's exactly what happened. Look at Benedict Arnold, the infamous American traitor. When he thought no one was watching, he orchestrated betrayal after betrayal, believing he was smarter than the system. But in the end, history caught up to him. His greatest mistake wasn't the betrayal, it was believing no one would notice. That's the same mistake your enemies made. They thought your kindness was blindness, but your silence was strategy. It was divine timing. The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. I'll read Proverbs 22:3. You weren't raised in comfort. You were trained in chaos, raised around manipulators, surrounded by people who twisted words into weapons, and instead of becoming one of them, you became fluent in their language and then chose not to speak it. That's why you could recognize a lie without needing to decode it. You've heard the tone before. You've seen the body language. You know what it looks like when guilt tries to wear a mask of innocence. Think of Oprah Winfrey, who spent her early life experiencing betrayal, abuse, and manipulation. But rather than letting it destroy her, she learned to read people with surgical precision. She used her spiritual discernment not just to protect herself, but to build an empire where truth was the currency. You, chosen one, are built the same way. Your past didn't just hurt you, it trained you. So when they lied to you again and again, you didn't panic. You let them think they were winning. You let them think their manipulation was working. Because if you had stopped them too soon, you never would have seen the full extent of their dishonor. You weren't just catching a lie. You were witnessing the collapse of integrity in real time. And that was invaluable data for your destiny. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. R. Galatians 6:7. Ask yourself this. Chosen one, what's more powerful, catching someone in a single lie, or watching them build an entire false reality, knowing all along it would collapse under the weight of its own deception? You let them walk right into the consequences, smiling, calm, composed, because the truth, unlike lies, doesn't need force. It just needs time. Consider Taylor Swift, who's often been misunderstood, lied about, and misrepresented in media. But instead of clapping back every time, she watched, she gathered, and then she dropped an album that laid everything bare on her timeline, in her power, and with precision. That's what you've done in the spirit. You let them talk, you let them act, but you chose when to speak. You chose when to expose. And now that the curtain has fallen, you're the one holding the truth, while they're choking on the lies they created. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out. Nid. Proverbs 10:9. Now they're stunned, not just by the fact that you knew, but by how long you let them pretend. That's what's haunting them, that they lied right to your face, and you still held your power. You didn't correct them. You didn't beg them to be honest. You let them finish the act because you already knew how the story ended. Think of Mother Teresa. People lied about her, mocked her, tried to expose her for being too radical in her compassion, but she never argued. She let time, love, and results speak. And now, her legacy outlives every accusation. So, here's the truth. Chosen one, you didn't need to expose them early. That would have just saved their ego. You let them finish the performance. And now the mask is cracked beyond repair. There is no coming back from it. And the most painful part for them, realizing the person they thought they were manipulating had already written the final chapter. You gave them the stage. They gave you the script. But you gave heaven the evidence, and heaven never forgets. Number 3. They didn't realize you were spiritually eavesdropping. Chosen one. Some people still don't understand that your ears aren't your only receivers. They think as long as you weren't in the room, you didn't hear. As long as no one told you, you wouldn't know. But oh, how wrong they were. Because your gift has never been limited to sound waves or spoken words. You don't just hear, you discern. You don't just pick up noise, you pick up spiritual frequency. They whispered behind closed doors. They plotted in quiet corners. They spoke your name like a curse in rooms you were never invited to. But while their mouths were moving in secrecy, your spirit was wide awake. Have you ever walked into a room and felt a chill? Have you ever suddenly felt someone's smile turn plastic? Their presence become heavier, and you couldn't quite explain why, but you knew. That's not imagination. That's discernment. That's the Spirit of God alerting you. Call to me, and I will answer you, and will tell you great and hidden things that you have not known. 1. Jeremiah 3:3. God was revealing their intentions before they acted on them. You weren't eavesdropping with your ears, you were perceiving with your soul. You sensed conversations without needing confirmation. You could feel when your name had been dragged across a table you never sat at. You could taste betrayal in the air before it even touched your reality. Take Martin Luther King Jr. For example, he once said, "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear." But he also discerned hatred long before it arrived openly. He didn't need a microphone to know which leaders in the room were smiling in his face while plotting behind his back. He had a spiritual radar just like you, chosen one. Your accuracy was never based on paranoia. It came from a divine download. Your dreams weren't random. Your discomfort around certain people wasn't a mood swing. You were receiving warnings in the spirit before the physical ever confirmed it. And that's what terrified them. You responded to conversations they thought they hid. You moved differently before they even acted. You were 2 steps ahead. And they couldn't figure out how. For the Lord God does nothing without revealing his secret to his servants, the prophets. No, Amos 3:7. They thought as long as they were careful with their words, they were protected. But how do you hide from someone who hears with their soul, someone who reads energy like scripture and deciphers spiritual codes in silence? Think of Princess Diana. Again, she often sensed what was happening behind palace walls, long before tabloids confirmed it. Her intuition wasn't just emotional, it was prophetic. The moment people's behavior shifted, she knew. Just like you, you didn't need evidence. The shift in atmosphere was enough. You felt it when people started pulling back for no reason. You sensed the shift before the betrayal ever became public. You adjusted your steps before the storm arrived. Because God whispered the weather report before the clouds ever rolled in. My sheep, listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. John 10:27. They're asking themselves now, how did you know? But the truth is, you didn't overhear them, you oversaw them. Spiritually, God gave you access to rooms your feet never entered, and now they're squirming, replaying conversations, wondering if someone leaked something, but no one did. God just made sure their plots were never private for long. For his spirit searches out everything and shows us God's deep secrets. 1 Corinthians 2:10. You were never the one who needed to sneak around. They were. You just stood still and let the wind carry the secrets to your soul. And that's what haunts them now. Not just that you found out, but that you were always listening from another realm, and they never saw it coming. Number 4. Your calm was a trap they fell into. Chosen one. Have you noticed how they misinterpreted your calm for confusion? Your peace made them think you were powerless. Your grace made them think you were gullible. But what they didn't realize is you were never sleeping. You were watching, strategizing, letting their actions confirm what your spirit already knew. They thought silence meant ignorance. But for you, silence is intelligence. Stillness is warfare. They expected confrontation. They expected you to blow up, argue, scream, or cry, because chaos is the only language they speak. But when you didn't react, when you sat there with a soft smile and calm eyes, they panicked. Why? Because now they couldn't read you, and manipulators need to read you in order to control you. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And Exodus petant. Think of Barack Obama again during moments of national turmoil. His silence in the face of attacks often unnerved people more than words could. That composure, that wasn't weakness. That was strategy, just like yours. You didn't need to raise your voice to shake the ground. Your silence said, I know. And that was more terrifying than any accusation. They kept digging their hole, and you let them, not out of pettiness, but because some people can only be taught by consequences, not confrontation. So you let your calm stretch out long enough for their own destruction to catch up with them. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Oh, Galatians 6:7. You watched them sabotage themselves while smiling in your face. You kept notes, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You didn't panic. You posed. Because you understood that God's timing always reveals what you don't have to chase. Think about Maya Angelou. When betrayal came her way, she didn't scream it from rooftops. She let her legacy speak. Her power was never in her volume, it was in her vibration. And you, chosen one, carry the same quiet authority. Your calm wasn't confusion, it was confirmation. You were letting them grow confident in their mess. Because the longer they thought they were winning, the more clearly they exposed themselves. You weren't withholding truth, you were letting it mature. When the storm has swept by, the wicked are gone, but the righteous stand firm forever. End. Proverbs 10:25. Now they're sitting in the wreckage, confused, scrambling, wondering how everything unraveled so fast. But it didn't unravel fast. It was unraveling the whole time. You just didn't interrupt it. You let peace cover you like armor. You let silence be your sword. Look at Michelle Obama. She's been mocked, misused, underestimated. But she never fired back. She said, when they go low, they go high. And the world watched her elevate above every lie, just like you're doing now. You let them walk straight into the fall they orchestrated for you. And the reason they're so stunned, you never even flinched. You held your head high. You stayed quiet. You didn't gloat. You let it unfold, and it did. In quietness and trust shall be your strength. Isaiah 30:15. So here's the question. How dangerous is a chosen one who doesn't need to react to prove they already won? That's the power you walk in. And that's the reason they fear you now. Not because you fought them, because you never had to. You simply stayed still. And the fall they planned for you became the trap they set for themselves. Number 5. Your accuracy offends them because it exposes their entire masked identity. Chosen one. Have you ever looked at someone and instantly seen through the smile, the posture, the carefully crafted personality they spent years perfecting? Not just one slip, not just one flaw, but the entire facade they wear like armor. That's your gift. Your spiritual sight doesn't stop at surface mistakes. It drills down into the root. And when you see, you don't just catch a lie, you collapse an illusion. They weren't just telling little white lies. Their entire identity was manufactured, a carefully painted version of themselves designed to hide the truth, to control perception, to impress the world while suppressing the mess. And when your accuracy touched it, it didn't just rattle them, it wrecked their entire foundation. Why? Because it was all built on performance. And your presence doesn't allow masks to breathe. Everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. Ephesians 5:13. You didn't need to try. You didn't force exposure. You didn't have to peel layers back one by one. Just your clarity, your stillness, your ability to see what others miss was enough to make their falsehood tremble. Because you didn't attack their behavior, you confronted their essence. You touched the core, and the core was hollow. Think of Whitney Houston. As brilliant and gifted as she was, much of her struggle came from the public image forced on her being America's sweetheart, when privately she was battling demons, addiction, and identity. What broke her wasn't just the pressure, it was the feeling of being seen only through a lens of performance, not truth. That's how these people felt around you, like your insight pierced through the performance, and they couldn't escape it. You didn't shame them, you didn't mock them, but your ability to simply see them stripped away their only protection, the lie they built their life around, and that's why they're offended. Not because you lied, but because you never had to. You told the truth without speaking a word, and their entire image shattered in silence. For nothing is concealed that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Luke 12:2. Have you noticed how they squirm now? How they get uncomfortable in your presence, even though you say very little? That's not coincidence. That's conviction. You've become a mirror, and not the kind that flatters. The kind that reflects everything they're trying to forget about who they really are, and how far they've gone to hide it. You didn't need to destroy them. You didn't try to. But the problem is, truth doesn't need permission to destabilize a lie. It just is. And when someone builds their identity on manipulation, your insight feels like an earthquake. Every glance you give is a spiritual X-ray. Every word you speak hits deeper than they expect. Why? Because you're not speaking from your ego, you're speaking from your anointing. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. Proverbs 20:5. This is the part they can't get over. You didn't come with accusations. You came with discernment. You didn't have to prove they were false. The way you withdrew your energy, the way your spirit stopped participating in the performance, that alone told them you saw too much. Think of Robin Williams, one of the funniest and most beloved actors of all time, yet hiding a deep, unspoken sadness behind the laughter. Millions didn't see it until it was too late, but someone spiritually awake like you would have felt it. That's the difference. You feel what others miss, and when you do, it often reveals pain and pretense. People spend decades trying to hide. Now they're afraid. Not of what you'll say, but of what you'll see next. They wonder, if you could see that, what else do you know? But what haunts them more is the fact that they no longer feel safe pretending around you. You are truth in human form, and your clarity doesn't give them space to maintain the mask. The one who gets wisdom loves life. The one who cherishes understanding will soon prosper. 1 Proverbs 19:8. You weren't looking for flaws. You were looking for essence. And now they're realizing that their illusion can't survive around someone who lives in the light. You never needed to shout what you saw. Just knowing it shook their entire identity. Because if one chosen one could see through it, maybe others can too. Number 6. They thought you needed evidence, but you were the evidence. Chosen one. The most powerful confirmation is not something you can hold in your hand. It's the shift that happens in your spirit. They assumed you needed screenshots, receipts, or outside witnesses to validate what you felt, but you didn't. You were the witness. Your intuition wasn't suspicion, it was revelation. They thought they were safe because you didn't confront them. But confrontation isn't your style. Your withdrawal was the confrontation. When you stopped responding, when your eyes stopped lighting up, when your voice got quieter and your movements more intentional, that was your evidence. You don't need to yell the truth when you're already embodying it. The Spirit Himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. Romans 8:6. They couldn't figure out how you knew, but you didn't need to explain it. Because your soul always knows before your mind catches up. And when your spirit said, "Pull back," you listened. No argument, no begging, just a clean, holy detachment. And that's what haunts them now. You didn't accuse them. You simply left mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And that absence screamed louder than any proof they expected. Think of Malcolm X. People thought they could discredit him with rumors, fear, or silence. But he stood firm in what he knew. His clarity wasn't in documents, it was in presence, in conviction, in unwavering peace. That's what you've embodied too. They assumed your quietness meant uncertainty. But the truth is, you were too certain to waste energy debating. You already knew. You already felt it. That shift in energy, that moment you stopped engaging in their games, that was the verdict. And when peace showed up in your heart, you knew. It didn't matter who believed you. God did. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. Now they're spiraling, not because you exposed them, but because you didn't. You didn't need a courtroom. You didn't need an audience. You didn't need applause. Your quiet departure said, I know. And they can't undo that. They can't debate it. They can't spin it. Your stillness is louder than any story they've tried to tell. Look at Simone Biles when she withdrew from competition to prioritize her inner well-being. The world debated her decision, but she didn't argue. She became the evidence that honoring yourself is more powerful than public approval, just like you. Chosen one. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Mentor, Psalm 23:2-3. Your calm, that was your confirmation. Your peace in the middle of spiritual war, that was your power. While they expected an explosion, they were hit with silence. And now, they're haunted by the one thing they didn't anticipate, your unshakable knowing. You never needed them to confess. The truth was already living in your spirit. And now that you've walked away, they can't lie to themselves either. Because when the person they tried to fool doesn't even ask for the truth, it's already over. And that, chosen one, is the kind of divine knowing no amount of receipts can compete with. Number 7, they're not just shocked. You knew they're scared of what else you see. Chosen one. It's one thing to be surprised. It's another thing to be terrified. And right now, that's where they are. They're not just shocked you figured it out, they're genuinely afraid. Because if you saw that, what else have you seen that you haven't said? What else are you holding in that holy silence of yours? What deeper truths are you carrying that they can't access? Control. Or predict. That's what's haunting them now, not the exposure. But the suspense. It's the pause after the reveal. The calm after the storm that never came. They expected an explosion. They braced for a breakdown. They anticipated you would lash out, confront them, tear their lies apart in front of everyone. But instead, you remained still. And that stillness, it's unraveling their peace more than any loud accusation ever could. The wise are cautious and turn away from evil. But a fool is reckless and careless. End of Proverbs 14:16. They're spiraling, not because you told the truth, but because you haven't told all of it. You only spoke a fraction, and it was enough to shake them. Now they're stuck in the echo chamber of their own thoughts, replaying conversations, rewatching their own facial expressions, wondering if you caught more than they realized. And you did. Of course, you did. Have you ever seen someone smile at you with fear behind their eyes? That's not admiration. That's anxiety. You've made them second-guess their own manipulation because you never needed evidence to see through it. You just knew. You've always been 2 steps ahead. Chosen one. Not because you were digging for secrets, but because truth follows you like a shadow. Think of Edward Snowden. When he revealed classified government surveillance, the world didn't just panic because of what he said. It panicked because of what he might know next. What else was in the files? What hadn't been disclosed yet? That's what people feared. And that's you. You've become the walking symbol of what's already been exposed. And what could be. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. In Proverbs 15:3. They thought they were in control. They thought they held the narrative, but your spiritual sight dismantled the story, thread by thread. And now you're the author of the room. They don't speak freely around you anymore. Why? Because your presence is a mirror. One glance from you makes them feel like their lies are peeling off layer by layer. And you didn't do it with anger. You did it with awareness. What kind of power is that? To shake someone without raising your voice? To convict someone without naming the crime? To cause a manipulator to tremble? Not by attacking, but by understanding. That's divine. That's holy. That's chosen. Consider Nelson Mandela again. After 27 years in prison, he emerged, not seeking revenge, but walking in dignity. And yet, many of those who had persecuted him were terrified. Why? Because dignity in the hands of someone who sees clearly is more dangerous than violence. Chosen one, your quiet truth has more weight than their loudest lie. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Emso, Proverbs 2:6. They underestimated you once. They thought you were ordinary. But now they see the supernatural clarity you walk in, and they're shaken. Every word you say feels like it could contain a hidden message. Every silence you hold feels like a secret they're not prepared for. And every calm expression you wear makes them question what you've discerned in them that no one else has. Have you noticed how they try to read your reactions now? How they glance at you nervously, trying to decode your expression? You don't have to say anything. Your presence alone is evidence that the truth has already touched them, whether they're ready to face it or not. Look at Anthony Bourdain, a man who traveled the world and carried quiet discernment. He picked up on culture, energy, tension, and spiritual weight in rooms most people ignored. He didn't need to explain his knowing. He simply moved through the world with a kind of sacred insight that both disarmed and disturbed. You're the same. You read the room spiritually. And now, they know you're not just observing, you're seeing. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Every. Ecclesiastes 12:14. They're no longer afraid of being proven wrong. They're afraid of being seen, truly seen by someone who can't be manipulated, someone who doesn't need backup or proof to confirm the truth. You didn't retaliate. You didn't expose them. But the fact that you could, that's what's keeping them up at night. You've taken back the narrative not by force, but by frequency, and they feel it. They feel the shift. They know they're no longer in control. Every time you walk into a room, they brace for what you might say or not say. And even your silence sounds like judgment to them. That's not on you. That's on the guilt they can no longer silence. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. In Colossiens 4:6. So what now? They tiptoe. They over-explain. They overcompensate. Why? Because they're not sure how much you know. And more importantly, they're afraid of what you'll reveal next. Your silence has become prophetic. Your presence is conviction. You've become the living reminder that truth walks among them, and it looks a lot like you. And the part that rattles them most, you're still not saying everything, and that means the power is still yours. Number 8. They confessed without knowing. Chosen one. Have you ever watched someone try their best to hide the truth from you, only to realize they were exposing themselves the entire time? They didn't confess with their words. They confessed with their energy. While they were smiling and talking, trying to perform, Your spirit was decoding their every signal, and that's what's tormenting them now. They thought they were keeping it together, but you were watching every nervous flicker, every shallow breath, every glance that lingered just a little too long. They didn't know. Your gift wasn't just hearing, it was reading between their words, reading their energy, reading the contradictions they didn't even realize were showing while they rehearsed their story. You were tuned into their subconscious frequency. You weren't searching for information. You were observing the essence, and that's why you saw everything they didn't mean to show. For the Word of God is living and active, discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. Hebrews 4:12. You weren't just listening to what they said. You were listening to the pauses, the hesitations, the over-explanations, the shifting tone when a topic got too close. Their mouth said one thing, but their posture screamed another. The body never lies. And you've trained your soul to recognize that language spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically. You read what others miss. Think of Lieutenant Columbo, the fictional detective, famous for seeming distracted or slow until the very end, when he delivers the exact truth in one final question. People underestimated him because he looked casual, but behind the scenes, he noticed everything. You are Columbo in the spirit, quiet, disarming, but surgically accurate. Every fake laugh, every dramatic sigh, every twitch of their eye was a spiritual confession. And the most haunting part, you never had to ask, you never had to confront. They told on themselves simply by standing in your presence. You were reading a truth they couldn't even admit to themselves yet. The spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all his innermost parts. Log, Proverbs 20:27. You didn't need a dramatic admission. You didn't need a big reveal. The truth leaked out slowly through a shaky tone, a clenched jaw, a tap of the foot, and as you listened silently, they grew uncomfortable, not knowing why. But now they know. Now they're replaying the conversation in their head, wondering what gave them away. Was it their wording, their tone, the way they smiled too wide? They can't name it, but they feel it. They know you saw something, and that spiritual paranoia is eating away at their performance. Remember Serena Williams, not just for her power, but for her ability to read her opponent's next move before it even happened. Her edge wasn't just strength, it was her perception. That's your edge too. Chosen one, you don't wait for facts. You anticipate behavior before it's admitted. The eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch on the wicked and the good. Proverbs 15:3. You weren't fooled by their script. You were locked in on their soul. And now, they're unnerved because you didn't need them to say it. You already knew, and they can feel that you did. They don't know what moment betrayed them, but something did. And now they live with the awareness that nothing about them was ever hidden in your presence. You didn't demand their truth. You just made it impossible for them to hide it. Number 9. You let them think they were fooling you because you needed them to reveal the final play. Chosen one. You could have ended it sooner. You could have shut it down the moment that first red flag waved. You saw the betrayal forming. You felt the shift in their tone. Your spirit alerted you immediately. But instead of calling it out, you leaned back. You watched. You let them think they had you wrapped. Why? Because you weren't after surface-level exposure. You were after depth. You needed to see what they would do when they thought they had control. You needed to know how far they were willing to take the lie. Because the final move, that's where the real motive lives. And when someone's faking their loyalty, the most dangerous truth is not what they do first, it's what they do last. Avon, my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me. Psalm 41:9. You smiled. You nodded. You said, "That's interesting." And while they thought they were playing you, you were charting their strategy. You weren't asleep. You were gathering intelligence. You weren't quiet because you were clueless. You were silent because confrontation would have ended the show before the finale. And you needed to see it all. Think of Queen Esther, who didn't reveal her identity or call out Haman's evil immediately. She waited, watched, timed her move with divine strategy, and when the final play came, it wasn't just the enemy who was exposed, it was the entire plot. That's what you did. Chosen one. You let them keep playing, and they got sloppy. They stopped hiding as carefully. They said too much. They moved too confidently. They thought your kindness meant confusion. But you were calculating, measuring, studying, and then they made their final move, the one they thought would break you. But it didn't break you. It exposed them. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. I've sent. Luke 12:2. They dropped their mask, not because you pulled it, but because they became so arrogant in your silence. They thought it wasn't needed anymore, and when it fell, you saw everything. The deception, the motive, the insecurity hiding behind control. You didn't just catch what they did, you understood why they did it. And that kind of discernment, it dismantles everything. Remember Steve Jobs, who often pretended not to understand something in meetings just to watch how others would explain it. He let them talk, let them assume, and then, at the right moment, he would deliver clarity that revealed he had been 2 steps ahead the whole time. That's what's haunting them now. The realization that you knew, that you let them lie, that you let them pretend, that you gave them space not to spare them, but to see them. And what burns the most? You didn't stop them. You let them walk themselves into exposure with no accusation, no pressure, no manipulation, just your quiet, deadly knowing. Be as shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. People. Matthew 10:16. And now, they're left with the memory of every lie they told while you smiled, every fake promise they made while you nodded, every manipulative play they ran while thinking you were falling for it, only to discover you were 3 steps ahead. The whole time, your silence was strategy, your stillness was surveillance, and your patience, that was the final judgment. They thought they were winning, but you were watching, and heaven was keeping score. Number 10. Your insight wasn't analytical, it was ancestral. Chosen one. The world keeps trying to explain your clarity with logic, but they don't understand you were never just observing, you were remembering. Your insight didn't rise from mental equations or shallow intuition. It came from something deeper, older, and far more sacred. You weren't connecting dots. You were decoding frequencies carried in your bloodline. What you knew wasn't new. It was inherited. That tightness in your chest when someone's energy felt off, that wasn't anxiety. That was ancestral intelligence tapping you on the shoulder. That split-second shift in your spirit before someone revealed their true colors, that wasn't a guess. That was the wisdom of generations echoing inside your discernment. They didn't realize you weren't just walking into the moment, you were walking in with every battle your lineage has ever survived. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. End of Jeremiah 1. Lima. You didn't just sense betrayal. You recognized it. You didn't just analyze behavior. You remembered the spiritual imprint of it. Because what you carry is more than knowledge. It's memory. The kind that doesn't come from your mind, but from your DNA. You weren't reacting emotionally. You were responding generationally. Think of Harriet Tubman, a woman who couldn't read or write, yet navigated hundreds of enslaved people to freedom through darkness and danger. How, she said, the Lord would guide her with visions. But those visions weren't random. They were spiritual downloads powered by lineage. Her people had suffered, prayed, survived. That ancestral wisdom activated her insight, just like yours. People think your decisions are impulsive because they don't understand the codes you live by. But you weren't being reckless. You were being obedient to something ancient, something divine, something that speaks not in full sentences, but in chills. Gut instincts, dreams, restlessness, and sudden knowing. It doesn't come with explanation, it comes with authority. This is what the Lord says: stand at the crossroads and look, ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it. W. Jeremiah 6:16. Have you ever suddenly pulled back from someone you couldn't logically explain walking away from, and later the truth unfolded? That wasn't overthinking. That was protection. Your ancestors saw what your eyes couldn't. They whispered. They shielded. They warned. Not with words, but with instinct. And, chosen one, you listened. While others waited for receipts, you were already gone. You didn't need to catch them. You felt them. And what confuses your critics is that your insight works without evidence. But that's because your soul isn't relying on intellect. It's guided by lineage. Your clarity isn't isolated. It's inherited. Look at Frida Kahlo, a painter whose surreal, symbolic visions weren't just art, but the language of pain passed down through generations. Her expressions weren't merely individual, they were cultural, ancestral, spiritual. That's how you operate. Your responses don't come from this moment, they come from the library of suffering, wisdom, and survival inside your bones. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, He has put eternity into man's heart. Ecclesiastes 3:11. And that's why your presence unsettles people. They can't lie to you effectively, not because you're suspicious, but because you're sacred. Your very being carries too much memory, too much holy pattern recognition. When someone tries to manipulate you, they're not just going up against you, they're challenging the memory of your entire bloodline. That's why people who mean harm start to feel exposed around you, because your spirit recognizes their blueprint. You've seen this story before. You've felt this trick before. Maybe not in this body, but your lineage, it remembers. And when legacy speaks, lies lose power. Think of Chief Sitting Bull, the Lakota leader whose spiritual dreams warned of war before it happened. His decisions weren't always rational by Western standards, but they were accurate because he trusted something ancestral, something eternal, just like you do. The Lord confides in those who fear Him. He makes His covenant known to them. Psalm 25:14. You don't just carry insight, you carry encoded memory. And when you walk into a situation, you're not alone. You're accompanied by centuries of wisdom. That's why you pause before others do. That's why you speak last, but see first. That's why your boundaries come without explanation, because they're not always coming from you. They're coming from the generations who prayed you into existence, and who now stand behind you whispering, "This doesn't feel right. Step back, They thought you were smart. But it's deeper than intellect. You're ancestrally armed, and what's even more powerful, you're not just reacting from memory, you're transforming it. Every time you make a healthy decision, you break a cycle. Every time you walk away, you rewrite history. Every time you honor your discernment, you honor those who didn't have the freedom to act on theirs. You're not just spiritually awake, you're historically activated. That's why they can't predict your next move, because they're playing checkers. And you're playing chess with ancestors who've already won this game before. So let them be confused. Let them wonder how you just knew, because you didn't need proof. You were born with the password, and every time deception shows up, your bloodline whispers it back to you. We've seen this before, and we're not falling for it again. Number 11. They built their strategy on your blindness. Now their empire is collapsing. Chosen one. Some people didn't just lie to you. They built around you. Constructed strategies, relationships, and reputations, all based on the assumption that you couldn't see. Every move they made depended on your supposed blindness. They thought they were architects of a false kingdom you would never notice. But what happens when the very foundation of a kingdom turns out to be awake the whole time? You were never the fool they mistook you for. They mistook your grace for gullibility, your silence for sleep, your peace for permission. But you were never blind, you were gathering. You were not silent because you were powerless. You were silent because you were strategic. You let the show unfold, let the actors believe they were convincing, but all the while, your spirit was recording every scene. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. What they didn't count on was your awakening, your discernment, your divine timing. And now, the illusion is crumbling. Not because you shouted, not because you fought back, but because you simply stopped agreeing with the lie. And when a chosen one stops cooperating with the illusion loses power. Think of Rosa Parks. She didn't shout. She didn't fight. She simply refused to move, and her quiet resistance collapsed. An entire system. That's you. You stopped participating in the role they assigned you, and the entire script fell apart. They called it a relationship, but it was manipulation. They called it loyalty, but it was dependence on your silence. And now that you've stepped out of the false reality they crafted, the walls are caving in. Their control is slipping. Their alliances are fracturing. Their empire is in freefall not because you destroyed it, but because your truth made it unsustainable. Therefore, whoever hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Matthew 7:24. And the ripple is spreading. The people they turned against you, some of them are starting to see. Some of them are questioning the narrative. Because when the light shines, it doesn't just reveal one lie, it exposes the whole web. Look at Julian Assange. Whether one agrees with his methods or not, the impact of his revelations wasn't in the volume, it was in the exposure. Entire governments scrambled, not because he overpowered them, but because truth surfaced. And truth, once revealed, doesn't shrink back. They thought your ignorance was holding their world together, but it was your cooperation that did. And now that you've pulled your energy back, their structure has lost its center. Their control was never sustainable. It only worked in the dark. But chosen one, you're made of light, and light dismantles every illusion effortlessly. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. Ephesians 5:13. They're scrambling now, not to fix you, but to repair the image they created for themselves. But it's too late. The illusion has been pierced. The kingdom of lies has no foundation anymore, and you didn't lift a sword. You simply opened your eyes. Number 12. Your truth was so precise they thought you were spying. Chosen one. Do you know how powerful your discernment is? It's so exact, so sharp, that people think it's impossible for you to just know. You didn't hit close, you hit dead center. You spoke truth that sliced through layers of illusion like a blade. Not vague, not generally, but with terrifying precision. They thought no one could possibly know what you spoke on. They thought their behaviors were well masked, their motives well hidden. But when you showed up with clarity, they were stunned. Their first assumption, you had to be spying. Someone must have told you something. There must have been a leak, a betrayal, a tap, something. But no, there was no human source, just divine alignment. Surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants, the prophets. Nine, Amos 3:7. You didn't stalk their pages. You didn't dig through their texts. You didn't interrogate mutual friends. You simply stood still. And the truth came to you, like mail from heaven. You saw what you needed to see, not because you searched, but because you were spiritually synced. And what shook them most wasn't just that you knew, it's that you knew without trying. Think of Tesla, the inventor. His insights came in dreams, visions, sparks of revelation, not from formulas or textbook repetition, but from a frequency only few can hear. You're tuned in the same way. Chosen one, your insight isn't learned, it's given. Your stillness made them paranoid. Your silence made them spiral. Because if you could say that without evidence, without being in the room, without a source, how much more do you know that you've never said? For God gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Proverbs 2:6. And that's the part haunting them now. Not just what you said, but what you didn't. Because if you saw one secret so clearly, how many more are you quietly holding? How many more truths are sitting in your discernment like sharp arrows you never fired? Look at Joan of Arc, who prophesied military strategy and political truths with such precision. People accused her of sorcery, but her only source was divine hearing. She never needed to spy. She listened to God. Just like you, the Holy Spirit will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I have said to you. No, John 14:26. They thought they were safe because they kept secrets. But spiritual people don't need secrets to be spoken. They're revealed through energy, through dreams, through a sudden shift in the atmosphere. And you've trained yourself to hear without sound, to see without sight. That's what they missed. Your clarity came wrapped in peace, and they couldn't handle that. Because people who rely on lies need chaos to survive. But your calm disarmed them. Your accuracy made them question their own reality. And now, your silence is driving their paranoia. You will hear a voice behind you, saying, "This is the way. Walk in it." Though, Isaiah 30:21. They can't sleep, not because you said too much, but because they know you saw too deeply. And if you saw that, what else do you see? Your gift doesn't chase truth. It magnetizes it. And now, chosen one, they're not just afraid of you speaking, they're terrified of you watching. Number 13. You didn't react because you were calculating your exit strategy. Chosen one. People often assume silence is weakness. They see someone quiet, composed, and think they must be stuck. But in your case, your silence wasn't hesitation, it was calculation. You didn't react, not because you didn't feel anything, but because you were already planning your way out. Every lie they told, every subtle betrayal, every shift in energy wasn't just a blow to your heart, it was data for your strategy. While they thought you were frozen in confusion, you were mentally detaching, watching the patterns form, studying their behavior like a chess master, anticipating the final move. They misread your patience for passivity. They assumed you'd stay just a little longer, that they had more time to play with your emotions. But the whole time, you weren't clinging to hope, you were measuring distance. You weren't stuck, you were sharpening discernment. Instead of lashing out or arguing your worth, you went inward. You became still. You started taking mental screenshots. You started piecing together who they were behind the performance. You weren't waiting for an apology or a miracle. You were waiting for confirmation. And once the truth became clear, you didn't explode. You executed. By the time you were ready to walk away, you'd already left emotionally. You had shifted your energy, withdrawn your trust, pulled back your peace, and placed your focus on what was next, not on what was lost. And that's what hurt them the most. You didn't just leave the situation, you left clean. No dramatic exit, no need for closure, no final text to explain. You simply slipped away with grace. No fire, no noisy, just the quiet sound of a door closing behind you, one they never imagined you'd walk through. Now they're sitting in confusion, trying to figure out how they lost access to someone they thought they had full control over. They're spinning, because the narrative they were preparing for a messy breakup, an emotional blow-up, a chance to paint you as unstable, never arrived. You didn't give them the story they wanted. You gave them silence. You gave them absence. You gave them a ghost who didn't haunt, but healed without needing revenge. And that kind of peace, it's a power most manipulators can't recover from. How many times did you feel the exit in your spirit long before you made it with your feet? How many times did you sit in a room where you knew the truth but said nothing, not because you were weak, but because you were wise? Have you ever walked away from someone emotionally, spiritually, and energetically long before they even realized you were gone? If so, type "I moved in peace" in the comments. Because your silence wasn't surrender, it was your sovereignty. Look at Michelle Obama. She's been criticized, mocked, and misrepresented, yet she never reacts the way they expect. Her responses are measured, intentional, graceful, and in that calm, she maintains her power. You've done the same. You didn't react because reacting would have meant they still had your emotions, but they didn't. You were no longer trying to explain your worth, you were embodying it. You had already made peace with the truth, and that peace became your strength. You watched them slowly disqualify themselves, and you never interrupted the process. You didn't argue, because arguing would have meant you were still trying to convince them of something, but you already knew. You didn't wait for closure, because you realized closure isn't something they give, it's something you create. And once that realization settled in your spirit, the game was over. You weren't emotionally invested anymore. You were spiritually aligned, and that alignment made your exit precise, powerful, and irreversible. They thought you were theirs to manipulate, but you were never theirs at all. You were just patient enough to let the truth unfold. And once it did, you walked out with dignity they can't imitate, and a silence they still can't forget. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And now they know they didn't lose you because you were confused. They lost you because you got clear. Number 14. They thought you were the subject. Turns out, you were the judge. Chosen 1. Have you ever been treated like an experiment, like someone who was being watched, studied, manipulated as if your reactions were under a microscope while they pulled the strings? That's exactly how they saw you, in their minds. You were the subject. They believed they were the ones in control, that you were the one being tested, that everything was unfolding according to their plan. They thought they were the master puppeteers, measuring your loyalty, testing your tolerance, and baiting your responses, never once considering that the power dynamic wasn't what they imagined. But what they failed to see was that you were never the one being examined. You were the one examining, while they crafted a role for themselves: false humility, twisted charm, carefully timed words. You were watching, silently, intentionally, every little move they made, every push, every passive-aggressive moment, every attempt to shift blame or fish for control. It all became evidence. You weren't confused. You were collecting. You weren't offended. You were assessing. They thought they were watching you fall for a trap. But you were documenting the blueprint of their manipulation with spiritual accuracy. Have you ever watched someone try to test you, only for the test to backfire because you already knew the answers before the exam began? That's what happened here. And here's the question they never asked themselves. What happens when the person I'm trying to fool is actually watching me with full awareness? That's what turned their strategy into a self-inflicted downfall. They thought they were observing your loyalty, but you were evaluating their character, and now they're haunted by the realization that while they thought they were setting the tone, they were showing their true colors instead. You never once reacted the way they expected. You didn't argue your worth. You didn't raise your voice to force respect. You didn't fight for clarity from someone who had already revealed themselves. Instead, you stepped back. You went quiet. And in that silence, they kept talking, kept performing, kept revealing layer after layer of the mask they had glued to their face. You weren't hurt. You were confirming. You weren't emotionally overwhelmed. You were spiritually aligned. And once your discernment gave you clarity, you made your judgment not with rage, not with revenge, but with release. Just like a judge doesn't scream from the bench. You delivered your verdict in silence. Your distance was the decision. Your refusal to play along was the judgment. Your inner peace was the proof that you had seen enough. And what stings them the most now is that there was no appeal process, no second chance, no opportunity to manipulate the outcome. You don't reopen a case that's already been ruled on. And you don't explain yourself to people who failed the test. You never told them they were taking. Think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a woman of few but powerful words. She never needed to shout to change the legal landscape. Her strategy was subtle but undeniable. She studied, listened, and delivered decisions that outlived every argument. That's the same power you carry. You're not driven by emotional chaos. You move through spiritual discernment. That's why they never saw your exit coming. They didn't realize they were being weighed, measured, and found lacking until the moment you walked away with nothing left to prove. So let me ask you, how many times have you been in a room with people who thought they were controlling the narrative, while you sat quietly collecting the truth? How often have you been misread as weak because you didn't immediately react? And now, in hindsight, can you see how your restraint wasn't confusion? It was divine courtroom protocol. If that's you, type I was never the subject. I was the judge. Because you've been walking in spiritual authority the whole time, you never set out to destroy them. You didn't walk in with malice. You came with openness. You gave space for truth, for growth, for mutual respect. But when they chose deception, manipulation, and performance, you chose clarity, and clarity, chosen one, always dismantles anything built on illusion. Your gift isn't just seeing through lies, it's standing so firmly in truth that anything false disintegrates in your presence. Think of Maya Angelou, whose quiet wisdom carried more power than 1,000 arguments, when she said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." She wasn't encouraging suspicion, she was encouraging spiritual discernment. You've lived that truth. You didn't wait for repeated offenses. You saw it once, understood it fully, and made a judgment that honored your peace. They're scrambling now, not just because you're gone, but because they realize they were performing in front of someone who never saw them as the role they pretended to play. You saw behind the curtain. You heard what wasn't said. You picked up on spiritual frequencies they didn't know they were broadcasting. And now they're desperate to know when exactly you figured it out. The truth? You always knew. You were just waiting to see how far they'd go before they condemned themselves with their own actions. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Achat Samuel, Shesh Isra, Sheba. You never had to yell, never had to expose, never had to break your character, because God already handed you the gavel. And when He said move, you moved. You weren't being dramatic. You were being divine. Now the masks have fallen. The performance is over. The truth is out. And you're still standing, with a clear spirit, clean hands, and a peace that no chaos can replicate. You weren't the fool in their story. You were the lesson, and they will never forget it. Beloved, if you've made it this far reading, feeling, reflecting, then this wasn't just a message. It was a moment of alignment, a spiritual mirror, a divine wake-up call for your soul. This isn't entertainment. This is your confirmation. And if it stirred something deep inside of you, that's not random. That's God pressing gently on your heart to remind you, you've been right the whole time. You're not imagining things. You're not being too sensitive. You're spiritually awake in a world that benefits from your silence. But your silence, when rooted in discernment, is not weakness. It's warfare. It's strategy. And it's protection. So take this message as your spiritual validation. You weren't just observing. You were documenting. You weren't just quiet. You were collecting proof. And you weren't just surviving manipulation. You were rising above it with dignity, with intelligence, and with legacy guiding every step. You are not the broken one. You are the breaker of cycles. You are not the problem. You are the proof that truth still walks among deception. Maybe you've been made to feel like you were always the one being judged, like you were always the one who had to explain, defend, prove, or apologize. But this time, the tables have turned, because you weren't the subject, you were the judge. You weren't being controlled. You were studying the behavior of those who thought they had power over your emotions. And now, as you walk away with grace and clean hands, know that you're not leaving empty. You're leaving full with truth, clarity, and strength that cannot be faked or taken. If this message felt like it was written directly to your journey, it's because it was. Not by me, but by the divine hand that's been guiding you this entire time. Maybe you've been questioning yourself. Maybe you've been wondering if you're the only one who moves like this, who senses things before they happen, who walks away without drama, who sees without needing evidence. You are not alone. There are others like you. And this space, this message, this community, it's your reminder that the chosen ones don't operate by the rules of the world. We move by divine instruction. And when you walk with God, you don't chase truth. Truth finds you. Thank you for being here, truly. Whether you're a long-time supporter or just discovering this space for the first time, your presence means more than you know. The fact that you've made it to the end of this message says something about your spirit. It says you're hungry for truth, for healing, and for growth. That makes you family here. That makes you chosen. And if you feel led to support this work in any way, whether it's through a super thanks donation, a comment, or simply by sharing this message with someone who needs it, please know this: your support is deeply appreciated, but never expected. Whether you give or not, you are seen, you are valued, you are loved. This space is for all of us, the sensitive, the strong, the seers, the warriors in silence. Every view, every share, every word of encouragement helps keep this mission alive. And I am sincerely grateful. So if this resonated, drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Say, I moved in peace, if you've ever walked away silently. Not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Share your experience because someone else out there needs to know they're not crazy for trusting their spirit. They're not alone in this. We are walking it together, one revelation at a time. And as we close, I speak this blessing over you. May your clarity grow sharper. May your peace become untouchable. May your silence speak louder than noise. May the false masks around you continue to fall without you ever lifting a finger. And may God continue to reveal what no one can hide from you. You are not ordinary. You are not random. You are chosen. You are covered. And you are deeply, divinely guided. Until next time, stay anchored, stay aware, and above all, stay true to what your spirit already knows. Because in a world full of illusion, you are the reality check. Welcome home, chosen one. God bless you.